For an upcoming build, I need to create some curved molding with this router bit. But I can't use a regular router table to create the molding that I need. It needs to be curved going in this direction. So I need to create a horizontal router table. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I created this horizontal router table that I drew up. So don't go anywhere and enjoy the journey. In this build, I'm just going to use scraps laying around to create the horizontal router table. And I got a 2x12 that I had laying around. So what I did is I ended up planing it so it's nice and flat and getting two edges parallel on the table saw. The next step is I'm going to use this T-track that will hold the router plate in place with some star nuts. So what I need to do though is I need to recess these on the edge, and I'm just going to use the table saw to do that.
Instead of using a measuring device to get the saw blade and the fence in the right position, I'm just using the T-track to get those spacings right. After running one side, I reposition the T-track for the other orientation, get everything set up, and run the next side to get that space for the T-track. I decided to change the saw blade to a 45 degree and cut the other edge just to give myself a little clearance on that curved trim. Now I can use the table saw sled to cut the two pieces to the right length. Now with the sides cut to length, I can go ahead and create the bottom of the horizontal router table and add layout lines of where I want those sides to end up. With those layout lines on, I can pre-drill for attaching those sides to the base. Now before I can attach those sides, I need to cut the T-track to length and attach those to the sides. Using a self-centering drill bit, I pre-drill and attach those small little screws into the T-track. So I decided to use a spacer to space the sides right where they're supposed to be. So I just cut a square piece and attached it just temporarily to the base to get those sides right where they needed to be. And with that spacer temporarily installed, I can go ahead and add glue to the bottom of the sides and screw those to the base. Now to make sure that these don't shift or move, I decided to add some clamps, squeezing it into that spacer, just making sure it's nice and snug so everything is nice and solid and doesn't shift while I screw it down. Now I'm just pre-drilling for the screws. Now I can remove that spacer. It is a little bit snug in there, but I finally get it out. The next step is to cut the sides of the actual table that the material is going to sit on. I'm just using some scrap MDF, cutting those to length.
All right, so these two pieces are going to go on either side of these. And I'm going to attach them with pocket hole screws. But I am excited because I upgraded my pocket hole jig. And this is the one that I upgraded it to. It's the Masca Pro Aluminum M1 pocket hole jig. So watch out for a video. I'm going to create a board that this will attach to, and all the accessories will have a recess with magnets holding that down. So watch for that video to drop. But for now, I'm going to bust this out. First time using it to add pocket holes to these two pieces. So this pocket hole jig has a groove right here, or a slot, kind of like the T-track that the track saw clamps will go into, but I don't have one. So I think I'm going to pick one up, but for now it's got some holes that I can mount it down to the board too while I create my pocket holes. So it's got some nice lettering there. I'm going to adjust it to 3/4 of an inch. Lock it down. All right. It's got this adjustable jig right here. That'll go right there. And the drill bit. I wonder if this is the same as this one. Yeah, that's the exact same. So I'll keep this one for future use, and I'll just use the one that came with my Craig pocket hole jig. So it's got this little cool dial. So the idea is you slide it through here, it hits that, put that on top, and you lock it down. Right to the table, make sure it doesn't move.
Now, if you notice here, I forgot to turn on the dust collection. And you can see some chips coming out the top when I pull that drill bit out. I'm like, oh, I finally realized what I did. As I was using this new pocket hole jig, I was thinking to myself, how can I make this clamping feature faster if I was doing larger or tall stuff? And I thought about those pneumatic clamps on my CNC. I may have to try that out on this.
I'm speechless. This pocket hole jig is awesome. I mean, it's solidly built aluminum, and it creates great pocket holes. And I am impressed with the dust collection. I mean, this thing works so nice. I don't have dust everywhere, chips. I should have bought this thing earlier. Masca is not a sponsor. Nobody sponsors my channel. I am just pleased with this nice piece of woodworking machinery, not machinery, tools, hand tools. This is great. All right, let's put this away and continue on with the horizontal router build.
I added some holes to these sides just to secure them to the upright sides, just making sure everything's nice and tight to the table. Now with that done, I can go ahead and create the actual table that the material will ride on while it's going through the router bed. This is just some inch material that I had laying around, and I want to make sure that it kind of slides back behind the router itself so that when those curved pieces are dangling off the side, they're just more secure to the table. Now with that marked out, I can go ahead and use my table saw to cut out that portion. I could have used a jigsaw, but I wanted some nice clean straight lines. So I'm using the table saw, raise it up, and stop at my marks. And then come back with my table saw sled and finish off the cut. Now you notice that I turn off the table saw after each cut. That is just to prevent any type of kickback or that piece flying out.
All right, that turned out pretty good. I did leave a space here for the router plate to go up and down. So before I attach this, I want to get this made because I want about a 1/16 of an inch away from this piece. That way there's not a large gap before I attach this in. So I guess that's the next step, is to get this router plate figured out. I've got it all in the CAD. Now I just need to create the program. And I think I've got some 3/16 acrylic. I'll have to see what I've got, but I think I'm going to use acrylic. I was thinking aluminum, but for something like this, I think I don't need to go that heavy duty. So let me see what I got.
So I did have some acrylic that was a 1/4 inch thick or a little thicker than that. And it's just using the robot here to cut that out, just making short work, leaving some tabs, and then coming back with a jigsaw to relieve those and cut it out. And then I'll just use a belt sander and just hit those tabs so they're nice and smooth. All right, come back with a countersink bit for the screws that will be used to bolt that down to the router. And I did need to remove all the handles for the router in order for this to fit in between the two uprights. Once that's installed, I can go ahead and add the T-bolts and the star nuts that will slide into the T-track.
So that plate turned out great. They lock in pretty nice and snug. It's not going to go anywhere once I get those all locked down. Now I can screw this down to these pieces, but I don't want to do it permanently. I want the option of switching these out and putting tilt in the table. So that would mean cutting these at an angle and then being able to tilt the table just for some different profiles, different things. I don't know. I just want to leave that option open. All right, so then I need to create a lift mechanism for the router itself. Yes, I can take these off and adjust it and do it by hand, but I'd rather have some fine adjustability. So I'm going to use a 3/8/16 bolt that's going to be up on top, and then it's going to attach to a piece of aluminum angle down here, and then I can loosen the T-nuts and then use that bolt to either lower or raise the router, making it those fine adjustments easier. Let's get this attached and focus on this lift mechanism.
So I had a piece of 2" by 2" aluminum angle floating around that I'm going to use to bridge the gap between the two uprights, and that will hold the bolt in position. The miter saw with a good wood blade cuts through this aluminum fairly easily. Over on the CNC, I created two pieces that are exactly the same with a cutout for the nut that will sandwich in between. So now I just need to add some glue and some spring clamps and let that dry for a couple hours. Using that same 2" by 2" aluminum angle, I created a piece that will bolt right onto the router plate itself. And this is where the bolt will pass through that plate, and then I'll have a lock nut on the top and bottom, sandwiching the plate in between. And this is what's going to create the lift of that router plate. Bolting this on with some 5mm screws that I had laying around. Now that the glue is dry with the part that I glued together with the nut sandwiched in between, I can go ahead and get things laid out with the aluminum plate right there, or aluminum angle, and I get holes lined up and drilled so that I can mount it and screw it to those side pieces. So I'm just marking the center where that bolt's going to pass through the aluminum, thinking to myself, I got this marked. I'm not going to have any problems with it. Well, as you'll see in a minute, I kept getting a larger and larger drill bit, trying to make that hole bigger because it didn't line up. All right, so that didn't work. So I resorted to the Ryobi jigsaw, hopefully to open this up, making it bigger for the bolt. All right, with that lined up, I can go ahead and screw the plywood piece to the aluminum angle. Now I can drill some pilot holes and attach this piece to the two side uprights. All right, with that installed, I can go ahead and thread in the 3/8/16 bolt. And what I need to do is thread it all the way down so it hits that aluminum plate attached to the router plate. and then I'm going to mark for center, pull everything off, and mark and drill out the holes, or one hole for 3/8/16 bolt.
So this is where I decided to use lock nuts instead of those collars. I could just get these at the store, no problem.
So I put a lock nut at the top of the plate, or on top, and then thread the bolt through, and then put another lock nut on the bottom side. This is going to keep that nut where it needs to be on that aluminum plate, and then I can raise and lower it. Right here, I'm using it with a attachment on my drill. It's looking pretty good, working very well. Now that that's all done, I need to focus on some safety. So I'm going to cut out some plastic and create a safety guard that goes over the top of the router bit. Just like my fingers too much, then I need something there to protect myself. All right, now I need to bend this plastic. So I double stuck tape a piece of MDF to the chop saw, its fence, and that's the distance where I need the bend to be. So now I'm just heating this up. This has taken quite some time to heat this up. I'm not sure what kind of plastic it is. Maybe it dissipates the heat quicker. I'm not quite sure, but it took a while. I finally got it warm enough to bend, and I'm just pushing in with a stick and continuing to heat it up until it finally goes flat against both surfaces. And I head back over the router table and see how it looks. Looks pretty good.
Call this project complete. But before I close out this video, I got to test it out. So I've got my big old router bit right here. We're going to test it out on. Going to chuck it up. Then I need to cut a piece of curved MDF of the radius of the molding that I want to create. And then I'm going to mill down some poplar and give this thing a try. So I cut some pieces on the CNC out of some 3/4 inch MDF. So the two pieces I cut out is this one right here is actually going to be the fence that I'll double stick tape to the horizontal router table. So that's going to be taped on there. The other piece is the size and shape exactly of the trim that I want. So I'm going to use this as my template, and I will transfer this onto a piece of wood. I'll cut it on the bandsaw pretty close, and then I'll double stick tape this to the wood and use my flush trim router bit to flush it up to get the exact same shape. Then I'll come over here to the horizontal router table, and this is where I'll put the profile in. So let me get some stock plane to 3/4 of an inch, and I'll get this cut out and in the shape that I want.
I found a piece of oak laying around that was the right size. So I'm just tracing my lines, heading over to the bandsaw to cut these out. If you remember at the first of the video, I held up a set of plans for this horizontal router table, and I've decided to add this to my Etsy store. This will be my first set of plans. It's going to be full color with DXF files, so you can cut stuff out on your CNC if you have one, or create templates and cut them out by hand. Go over to my Etsy store. I'll put a link in the description below. Check it out. All right, back to the build. Just using double-sided tape to adhere the template to the oak. Now, I've seen a lot of people do this with like blocks holding it down to try and keep your fingers away. I just find them so cumbersome, so I'm just being very careful and just using my hands on top of that template. And it worked out great. That tape really holds. I'm impressed on how well it works. All right, so I had to get an extension for this router bit. It just wouldn't extend far enough with the shank that was on it. So I put an extension in there, and now it brings it out far enough that I can get it in the right position for the curved piece.
It looks like right about there. So I'm gonna lock it down. And this is my test piece that we're gonna run through here. So I'm not gonna do this all in one pass. That would just be crazy, bonkers in the head. So I'm gonna do this a little bit at a time, maybe a 16th at a time, run it through, lower it, and just keep going down until I hit the spot where it matches up my test piece. So this is a little scary, this thing flying around, and I'm just a little scared right now. So I've got my pieces here. That's gonna come down. It's gonna be right above that. A little bit of safety. I don't know, we'll see. I may end up building a box that actually comes down and covers this. So we'll see. But we'll do some test runs, see how it works.
All right, so I added some feather boards to the tabletop. That way it's gonna keep the trim that I'm pushing through tight against the template guide, just keeping everything nice and snug. Now, as you can see, this thing is throwing wood shavings everywhere. So I think I am going to create a box that will cover the router bed with a hole on top and dust collection. Just trying to keep things from flying everywhere. But it works good.
So that turned out pretty well. There are some minor tweaks that I need to do to my templates. I need to make it a little bit wider. It's not quite getting the full round of the profile. So I'll need to do that, cut a new template out. And I did notice that as I was pushing it through, as I switched hands to go to the other side, it kind of lifted up a little bit. And it gives a little bit of a divot. So that's something that I need to figure out, maybe figure out how to get a feather board down, pushing it down. But so far, I'm pretty pleased with how this project turned out. So I'm gonna close out this video, and if you like this content, please consider subscribing, and I hope to see you next time here on Smedley Wood Design.